This is pre-reading for Alpha to Omega, Chapter 38, the last portion in Thucydides' Peloponnesian War, Chapter 6, The Athenians Go Too Far, Part 5. So in the last reading, we heard of Hermocrates from Syracuse. They're trying to win over the Camemerians for their alliance against the Athenians. So we heard that ambassador speak, Hermocrates, and now we have another speech. Here's Euphemus, the Athenian representative, and he is going to counter, of course, what Hermocrates has to say, as he tries to seek alliance with this Sicilian city-state as well. Now, it's very interesting in this first part. Thucydides talks a lot in his history about the concept of power. He doesn't say it directly, but here in this opening paragraph is another instance where we see this theme come out in Thucydides' writing. The Athenians believe that the gods have given them the power to rule all kinds of people and to create an empire. And they believe that it is a God-pleasing thing to use the power that the gods have given them. Okay, so there's an arrogance here. Later on, in later centuries, I should say, in the 1800s, the term realpolitik surfaces in history. This was applied in Germany first, but the idea is if you have the power, you use it. And it's a very pragmatic approach to government and to authority and to rule. We look at nations of the world and why they do things the way they do in the political arena. Sometimes the answer is as simple as, because we can. And that's the Athenian attitude here. I'm looking especially at line 3, ein dekaios echomen. Perites arches ein dekaios echomen. All right? So, Hermocrates begins. Okay? We arrive. Right? Now, here is a big prepositional clause right here, going all the way through here. This dative preposition, epi, ultimately goes with this. So epi with this dative ananeosai, you see the word neos in there, and ana means to do again. So ananeosis, you can see in the vocabulary list that this verb or this noun ends in sis. So nouns that end in sis in Greek mean the process of. So ananeosis, the process of renewing, right? And what are they renewing? Tes prateran ouze simakias. Okay, now it's not a genitive absolute. It's just wedged in there between the preposition and the dative. So this is all one big chunk, one big concept. Okay. Now, here, let me get a different thing right here. Here is our genitive absolute. Okay, now you'll need to give that a shading. Balo means to throw, but prosbalo means to throw at, and so it gets the derived meaning of attack. It's a military term. Okay, so this is a rebuttal to Hermocrates by Euphemus. Okay, so make sure you get the tense here on erumen, right? Look at the principal parts of Lego. Here we have another prepositional phrase. Now, just a reminder what relative pronouns do. So here we have a feminine relative pronoun, right? It refers back to our case, and you're saying, well, why isn't it in the same case? Well, remember, relative pronouns aren't like adjectives. They get their case. Now, they have to agree in gender and number. So here we have feminine singular for the noun arches and the relative pronoun hein, but they function the case is determined according to how it's functioning. All right? Concerning this rule, and we rightly have it. Okay? Or this rule which we justly have. Okay? So if you break it into two sentences, you can kind of see how the relative pronoun functions then. So, concerning this rule, and we justly have it. There you can see why it's accusative. Okay, so that's the end of the first sentence. Now, Euphemus is going to use the word gar, and I talked recently in class about the importance of these connecting words. Now, this is a logical connective. Why am I using gar? Well, I'm going to explain what I meant by the previous sentence. Okay? We will speak also concerning the rule which we justly have. For axioi ontes archomen. Okay, that's, in his mind, this is reason enough. Why do we justly have this rule? Because ontes axioi archomen. And now he's going to explain, take this hati here as causal. Okay, now, because, okay, here's a dative chunk right here. Both of those go together. Here's really my main verb. Because ophalumen. That's what we do with our power. We ophalumen. Whom do we help? Tous allos Helenas. Okay? And when do we help? Epaidan en kindinois osen. So you'll have to identify what kind of condition that is with epaidan kindinois osen. So we have the protasis and the apodosis inverted, but what kind of condition do we have there? Okay? After doing the drills and the sentences in chapter 38, I think it'll be pretty easy to spot, right? Not epaide, but epaidan. Okay, let's move on. So, Hermocrates had downplayed the Athenian power, and Euphemus, well, he's talking very confidently here. He just said, we have power to rule, and that's why we rule. And now the Athenian attitude becomes very clear in this next section, this next paragraph. You really get the attitude, and I don't know how these people could not get the impression that the Athenians will just use them for their purpose. Euphemus comes out and basically says that. Okay, so remember that the verb krasimus, or the adjective krasimon, is followed by a dative. So there you have kresimon himin. Now, here's another condition you have to identify. Well, I take that back. It's not a condition because we have a period right here after himas. So, what kind of construction do we have here with on ie? You may need to dig back into chapter 36 to look at your independent uses of the optative, okay? And now he's launching out in a different direction, and he's basically saying, well, you know, actually it's in your best interest to make an alliance for us. Okay, so here, okay, he's going to explain why. And look at all these genitives here. It really goes up to here. That's the first clause. This, you're going to maybe have to dig for a little bit. I don't know if that's in your vocab list, but go back to chapter 33. There you'll find the irregular comparatives. All right? And here, again we have on, all right? And, yes, here, right here. So, in this first paragraph, we have ia on and blaptoimetha on, okay? So, again, go back to chapter 36 and look at the uses there, and then you'll be able to pin down what that is. All right? So, Now, here, yeah. Okay, that whole clause, hypatuton, all the way down to pempsanton here, you can recognize the genitive, so you know what that is. We have a genitive participle. Okay. I suppose it's an agent. Ultimately, you say that. We have a passive idea here. Yes, especially with this, passive verb right here. So this dative chunk now at the beginning of the next sentence, I don't know what dative you want to call it in the interest of. Here is really the main thought. Okay. The main thought, and this actually, Ch38 Preread, is really kind of a clause that functions as the subject. So think of that as the subject of the sentence, and Ch38 Preread. Well, what is? Okay, so we kind of have a predicate nominative here. He's using two clauses to clarify his thought, right? I'm sorry, not present nominative, predicate nominative. We have verbs, linking verbs, estin and estin. So, uk allegan estin, and then just think of an equal sign, equals Ch38 Preread estin. All right? So, in the mind, this is equivalent. And it is equivalent for dative here, this dative chunk, and then or, okay, for another dative chunk. And think of polis here as city-state. So it's some kind of dative of advantage or disadvantage, okay? So he's just matter-of-factly saying that from our perspective, this isn't illogical, because if you have power, you use it. That's what you do with power. Now, in this last part, Euphemus is going to turn and raise fears in the minds of the Camarinaeans. It's so hard for me to say. Going to raise doubts in the minds of the Camarinaeans about the motives of the Syracusans. And so he says, and the Syracusans, okay, we have an ou de, so it's kind of a contrast here, but there's a break in thought here. Well, actually, it probably is here. I'm sorry. I should have, let me get rid of that. Okay, the break is really here by the comma. What kind of city? And here, my genitive of comparison. Always both te, kai, and here, hatan. Okay, so an indefinite temporal clause. Kairos does mean time or season, like the seasons of the year, but here the idea is more an opportunity, an opportune time. And here I have my subjunctive, right, with hatan. Okay, so he's talking about how they're just waiting, and they have resources bigger than we do, and they're just waiting, and this is the way they always act, and if the softball's over the plate, they swing and they don't miss. Okay, so he's warning them about that. Euphemus concludes kind of with a veiled threat. And here we have a condition. You'll have to decide what kind of condition it is, right? So find your verbs. So I, ek, balaita, and here is my conclusion. Okay, what kind of condition are we dealing with? Now, what he's saying is, in the future, if you don't join with us, you're going to really regret it. Okay, here, tein hemetron stratian, here in the future, tu loipo, he's talking about the Camarinaeans, that if they choose not to join, kakos pratantes, and the Olegon Moristas, here he's talking about their army, bouleseste edain. Boules thesta idain. Okay, I'm up against the clock here, the 15-minute clock, but this ends the pre-reading for chapter 38, part 5 of The Athenians Go Too Far.